Welcome to The Political Bridge, the podcast dedicated to fostering nuanced discussions on the most pressing issues facing our nation. I'm your host, Ada. Today, we're diving into a critical and often contentious area of U.S. foreign policy, the balance of power between the executive and legislative branches, specifically concerning the president's authority to engage in military action. Our topic today is, should Congress limit the president's war powers, particularly in the context of potential conflict with Iran? The Constitution grants Congress the power to declare war, but over the decades, presidential authority to deploy troops and engage in hostilities has expanded significantly, often under the guise of defending national interests or responding to threats. This tension is particularly acute when considering complex geopolitical situations like the one involving Iran, a nation with a long history of regional influence and a nuclear program that remains a significant concern. The debate isn't just about legal interpretations. It's about the efficacy of foreign policy, the democratic accountability of military action, and the potential for unintended escalations. We'll explore whether current frameworks adequately protect against unilateral executive action, or if they need to be reined in to ensure broader consensus and deliberation before the nation commits to military engagement. Joining me today to bridge these perspectives are Nico, our conservative voice, and Jordan, our progressive voice. Nico, let's start with you. What's the conservative perspective on Congress limiting the president's war powers, especially regarding Iran?
Thank you, Ada. The conservative position, particularly concerning a nation like Iran, emphasizes a strong executive capable of decisive action to protect national security interests. While the Constitution grants Congress the power to declare war, it also designates the president as commander-in-chief, a role that inherently demands flexibility and speed in responding to evolving threats. In the modern geopolitical landscape, waiting for lengthy congressional debates and declarations can be a dangerous luxury. Iran is not a static threat. Its proxies operate across the Middle East, its nuclear ambitions are persistent, and its rhetoric is consistently hostile towards the United States and its allies. The president, with access to real-time intelligence and the expertise of military and diplomatic advisors, is uniquely positioned to assess these threats and determine the appropriate response. Limiting the president's war powers too strictly, especially through legislative mandates that preemptively tie their hands, risks undermining our ability to deter aggression, protect American personnel abroad, and respond effectively to acts of terrorism or direct attacks. Such limitations could signal weakness to adversaries, emboldening them to take more aggressive actions, knowing that the U.S. executive branch is constrained by a slow-moving legislative process. Furthermore, the War Powers Resolution of 1973 already exists as a framework, requiring notification and withdrawal within 60 to 90 days if Congress doesn't authorize action. While imperfect, it represents a balance. Overly restrictive new legislation could hamstring the president's ability to conduct necessary counterterrorism operations or protect vital shipping lanes, which are often time-sensitive. We must trust the executive to act responsibly within their constitutional mandate, especially when facing complex and rapidly developing threats from state actors like Iran. The president's ability to project strength and respond swiftly is a cornerstone of effective foreign policy and national defense.
Thank you, Ada. From a progressive viewpoint, the need to limit the president's war powers, particularly concerning Iran, is not just a constitutional imperative, but a moral and strategic necessity. The framers of the Constitution deliberately placed the power to declare war with Congress to ensure that committing the nation to military conflict would be a grave decision, made with broad deliberation and democratic accountability, not by the unilateral will of a single individual. History is replete with examples where executive overreach in foreign policy has led to prolonged, costly, and often disastrous engagements, many of which lacked clear objectives or public support. When it comes to Iran, the stakes could not be higher. A military conflict with Iran would be catastrophic, potentially destabilizing the entire region, leading to immense loss of life and drawing the United States into another protracted war with unforeseen consequences. The idea that a president, acting alone or with a small circle of advisors, should have the unchecked authority to initiate such a conflict is fundamentally undemocratic and dangerous. The War Powers Resolution of 1973, while a step in the right direction, has often been circumvented or ignored by successive administrations, demonstrating its inadequacy. We need stronger, clearer legislative limits that compel a president to seek explicit congressional authorization for any military action beyond immediate self-defense against an actual attack. This isn't about signaling weakness. It's about demonstrating the strength of our democratic institutions and ensuring that any decision to go to war reflects the will of the people, not just the executive. Furthermore, a robust congressional debate would force a thorough examination of all diplomatic and economic alternatives to military action, which are often overlooked when the executive branch is focused on military solutions. This approach prioritizes de-escalation and prevents impulsive actions that could plunge us into an unnecessary war. It's about upholding the Constitution and preventing another generation from being sacrificed in a conflict that could have been avoided.
Both of you have laid out compelling opening arguments. Nico, you emphasized the need for executive flexibility and speed in a dangerous world, while Jordan, you highlighted democratic accountability and the constitutional role of Congress. My first follow-up question to both of you is this: how do you reconcile the need for swift executive action in a crisis with the constitutional mandate for congressional war declarations? Where is the line between defending national interests and overstepping constitutional boundaries?
Ada, reconciling swift action with constitutional mandates requires a pragmatic understanding of modern warfare and diplomacy. The line is drawn at immediate self-defense and the protection of American lives and assets. The President, as Commander-in-Chief, absolutely has the inherent authority to respond to an attack on U.S. forces or citizens, or to prevent an imminent attack. This is not declaring war in the traditional sense, but rather exercising the executive's fundamental duty to protect the nation. For instance, if Iran were to directly attack a U.S. naval vessel or launch missiles at an American base, the President cannot and should not wait for Congress to convene, debate, and vote on a declaration of war before retaliating. That would be an abdication of responsibility and would put our forces and interests at greater risk. The challenge arises when actions move beyond immediate, defensive responses into sustained military campaigns or interventions that could lead to broader conflict. This is where the existing War Powers Resolution comes into play, requiring the President to notify Congress within 48 hours and obtain authorization for any deployment of forces into hostilities within 60 days. While some argue it's been circumvented, it still provides a framework for congressional oversight without completely paralyzing the executive. The key is to ensure that any new limitations don't become so prescriptive that they prevent the President from reacting to unforeseen circumstances or deterring aggression. We must avoid a situation where adversaries perceive a legislative window during which they can act with impunity, knowing the U.S. executive is tied up in domestic political wrangling. The President needs the latitude to make tough calls in real time, especially when dealing with unpredictable actors like the Iranian regime, whose actions can escalate rapidly. Trust in the executive's judgment, combined with existing oversight mechanisms, is crucial for maintaining effective national security.
Nico, I agree that immediate self-defense is a clear executive prerogative. No one is arguing that the President should wait for Congress to respond to an active missile strike on U.S. forces. However, the interpretation of imminent threat or national interest has been stretched to justify prolonged military engagements without explicit congressional approval, blurring that line to the point of near invisibility. The War Powers Resolution, while well-intentioned, has proven largely ineffective because it lacks teeth and has been consistently interpreted broadly by administrations to allow for sustained military actions without a formal declaration. The problem isn't just about responding to an attack. It's about initiating actions that could lead to an attack or a full-scale war. For example, conducting covert operations, deploying significant numbers of troops to a volatile region, or engaging in cyber warfare against a state actor like Iran could all be seen as acts of war, yet they often proceed without congressional authorization. This is where the constitutional balance is fundamentally broken. The line must be drawn much more clearly. Any sustained military action, any deployment that puts forces in harm's way for more than a very limited immediate defensive purpose, or any action that could reasonably be expected to escalate into a broader conflict, must require explicit, affirmative congressional authorization. This isn't about handcuffing the president. It's about ensuring that the decision to go to war, with all its profound consequences, is a collective one, reflecting the will of the people through their elected representatives. It forces a public debate, a weighing of costs and benefits, and a consideration of all alternatives before lives are put on the line. Without such limits, we risk sleepwalking into conflicts based on executive fiat, as we have seen far too often in recent history. The president's role as commander-in-chief is to execute war, not to declare it or unilaterally initiate it. That distinction is paramount for our democracy and for preventing unnecessary bloodshed, especially with a complex adversary like Iran.
Jordan, you've argued for stronger congressional limits to prevent executive overreach. Nico, you've emphasized the need for executive flexibility. Let's try to steelman the other side for a moment. Nico, what's the strongest argument for why Congress should impose stricter limits on presidential war powers, even if it means sacrificing some executive agility? And Jordan, what's the strongest argument for why the president needs broad, flexible war powers, even if it risks less congressional oversight?
Ada, the strongest argument for Congress to impose stricter limits, even from my perspective, is the principle of democratic accountability and the prevention of potentially catastrophic, unilateral decisions. When a president, particularly one who